Yeah.
So I'm going to actually.
My apologies for the background, but I'm still at work. Just happened to have a break in the middle of my experiment. And
experiment. Okay, what kind of experiment? You can't just throw out the word experiment and then just gloss over that. We need to know.
I work for two businesses. So one is my own, and the other business, which is medical DNA testing. This is normally what I market, or what Angel would have marketed to you. And the other one is that I'm also part owner, is a test company that develops a specific platform. And right now we're trying to use that platform to build another COVID-19 test, as if there wasn't enough. But the goal here is to make it very rapid and something that is actually portable, so that people could do it at their privacy of their own home. Here's like a little prototype. This is just a skeleton. We already have a like a shell for it, and there's, I mean, again, this is just a prototype. This is a little chip. It goes in there. Your sample goes on top. Boom, you get a reading. And these chips will be like glucose strips, so that they'll be cheap, and you can now test yourself anytime you want.
Man, I don't know what to say. Like that is awesome. That, I mean, we still have people working on this stuff, because like COVID is not gone. Like it's still here. It's still relevant. There still needs to be people researching and working. So is that kind of your day-to-day job, or like how are the two, separate or different?
So it is a lot of this I do daily, and a lot of research and study is all revolving around COVID. So I have pivoted from not just the medical DNA testing, which is my main background and my main baby, that's where my heart is. But because of the pandemic, of course, I switched to COVID-19. My YouTube channel under my Merogenomics, which is a DNA testing company, heavily focuses on the vaccines and COVID. But one of the reasons why I'm also deeply personally interested in this area is because of the fact that I'm hoping that the vaccines that are being currently used, genetic vaccines, the mRNA ones, that's a brand new technology. So I'm hoping that once we actually figure out how to use it perfectly, I don't think we're there yet because it's brand new, but once we know that, we will be able to use it to treat human diseases, genetic diseases one day. Because you are modulating, or basically manipulating, how genes are being used, in this case by introduction of a gene that is foreign to you. It doesn't exist in your body. We're introducing a gene that it comes from a virus, hence it acts as a vaccine. But we could use the same technology to introduce RNA transcripts that we already produce in our body. But if you are producing ones that are broken, then you can see how this vehicle that we're using to add mRNA into our body, we could be adding mRNA that is not broken and maybe fix a disease. So I'm very, very interested
swapping them out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Or enhancing it, because you wouldn't be able to eliminate what's already in you that's broken, but by pumping that good ones that's not broken via this vehicle, same system as what we're using for vaccine, then we'd be hoping that the good stuff would overcome the outcome of the bad stuff. So that's kind of like what I fantasize about, that we can
kind of like a brace.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
and fix problems. And for some, I would imagine that for some diseases, it will definitely work. But there's still details to figure out. Like, how do you get it to the tissue you desire, right? There's many different tricks. Scientists.
There's a lot.
There's a lot. Yeah. And science never stops. It's continuously growing, right? So
I was trying to find the best way, and then a new technology, and then there's a new best way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're jumping way into it already. So we might as well just go ahead and get started. I can introduce you. All right, here we go. I'm just going to do, I'm going to introduce the show, and then I'm going to talk about, go follow me on these platforms, blah, 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 blah. Then I'll introduce you, and then I'll ask you a question, and we'll just, from there, wherever you want to go with it. I mean, I've got other things that I can ask, if we get, stuck or whatever, but I want it to feel natural. I want you to just be at ease and roll. Gans and Charlie, man, they really pumped you up. They said you're awesome, man. So I'm expecting great things.
I'm sure we'll have fun. Usually I get great questions, especially from people who don't know much about it. They ask brilliant questions because they think outside the box. So I'm absolutely certain we're going to have a good time for sure.
All right. Here we go. I'm excited, man. I was a little, well, you know what? I'll save that. All right, here we go. Man, my camera's a little choppy. Well, I wonder what's that about. Okay, here we go. This is the Living Numbers Podcast, and I am your host, Tony Rambles. Thank you all for watching, for tuning in, no matter where it is, Spotify, Apple, Breaker, Google, YouTube, wherever you may be listening. Thank you for making me and my wonderful guest here a part of your day. Now, before we get into the episode, you all know what time it is. We got to do some housekeeping. Make sure you follow me on TikTok and on Instagram @_TonyRambles_. You can email the show, onetonyrambles@gmail.com. Also, rate and review, follow, like, download, all of that great stuff. Okay, no matter where you are and no matter where you're listening or watching, if you're on YouTube. Hey, comments. Put some comments in on YouTube. We got a great doctor here. We'll have more guests. Okay, what do you guys want to know? What do you want to hear? Okay, now, you all know, every time we have someone on that's new, we got to do an intro. So, the good doctor here, and I'm not going to say his name yet until we finish, so maybe I'll say it right. All right, here we go. He has received his doctorate in biochemistry from the University of Alberta, the founder of Merogenomics, Inc., specializing in DNA sequencing. He's a leader in genetic testing and first in Western Canada to do so. He's a COVID researcher. He's posted many updates on various perspectives and aspects of COVID. We'll talk later on that. He loves hiking, the Edmonton Oilers, cosplay makeup, go-karts, jokes. He's very funny from what I've seen, and coffee. His desire is to bring access to DNA testing for health purposes to the masses. I present the incomparable Dr. Mikolaj Raszek.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And yes, you pronounced the name correctly. Right on. Congratulations.
Yes. I'm a speech teacher, so I feel like I should be able to, when I come to these names that are, I guess I can say not American names, okay, how good am I going to be with the pronunciation?
Yeah, you passed with flying colors on that one. Right on.
So for the people who have seen episode 43 and 42, Dr. Raszek is a colleague of Dr. Gans and also our senior financial advisor, T. Charlie Fatal. You can go check out those episodes, and they're all working together on a project called Money, Mind, DNA. And so we have the DNA on now. We had the money, we had the mind, and so now we got the DNA. All right, we're going to talk about Money, Mind, DNA in a second. However, we have to get to our first number. Now, because I have a DNA specialist on here, I had to try to find some things that are like, what would somebody who has this kind of experience, this kind of expertise and background, what are some things that I can ask him that maybe he's never been asked before that the people want to hear about, right? We got to make it plain, right? So everybody understands. So our first number is 42. Wait, no, I'm sorry. Our first number is 46. Would you have a guess on what that number means?
No.
All
You
right.
got me thinking about episodes first. I'm like, where is this leading?
So
Unless you're talking about number of chromosomes.
There you go. Yes. 46, 43 from mom, 23 from dad. And so my question here is, just to get it started. Related. Yeah, kind of. I'm using genetics to get to where we want to go. So here you go. How did you come to be a DNA scientist? So where did that start? From family or from background? How did this come to be? How did you get to now where you're studying COVID? You're doing all kinds of great stuff. So take us from the beginning.
Okay, so prior to my doctorate degree in biochemistry, I actually have a degree in genetics. So I was always interested in genetics. This is definitely a passion of a long time. But it was during my biochemistry PhD that the newest technology came out called next generation sequencing that finally allowed human genomes to be decoded, meaning looking at your own genome, i.e. your program code that determines how you exist and how you came to be. And I instantly was just fascinated about that. I understood it implicitly at the time that it will revolutionize medicine, and it has, and it continues to, and will continue to do so for years to come. And instantly I was into it. At the same time, I was working with mutagenesis, or the concept of altering DNA, as part of my doctorate degree, because my degree was tied to immunology. So now you can also link it to COVID-19 and immune system as well. And I was looking at how could I mutate the key enzyme responsible in the activation of your immune system. How could you mutate it so we could understand how different chemical compounds that interact with it could be perfected to interact with it even better. So I was already playing with DNA mutation of DNA and DNA coding for that particular enzyme. And when that technology came out, I was immediately aware of it, and I recognized this is definitely the future. Eventually, you have to align certain path for yourself and to build your career. And I wanted this to go back to my roots, my original degree, genetics. I'm glad I did biochemistry as well, because it enhanced my ability to understand science, read science, and that's all I do. Guys, I don't read books. I read science papers, and I find them fascinating and exciting and thrilling.
So like research.
That's right. And that comes across in my videos on my YouTube channel. They're all based on scientific publications, but my goal is to take what I read, which is not necessarily accessible to many people, and break it down to plain language, because I think science is fascinating, and happily discovering that so do many of the layman audience. They find it also fascinating. It just has to be presented in a language that is digestible.
Yes, that we understand. Where you go, huh? What? Have you always been into science? Like as a kid, was science class always your favorite, or was it always like that, or no?
No, not at all. My background is an artist. So as a child, I was quite gifted with painting, and I'm really good at painting or drawing. That's definitely, you had to list some talents. Drawing is my forte. I can whip out a portrait and so on. So I actually, I went to art school, high school. And it was in my high school that I was like, you know what am I doing with my life? I will never make any money as an artist. I'm switching to sciences. I was enjoying it enough.
You robbed us of the art. Do you still draw and paint? Do you still do any art?
I do, but it comes at a pace of maybe one drawing a year. But when I do, it's like, oh, it feels so good, right? It feels like, that felt good to bust that out. And over the years, I've perfected my own style of drawing just for fun. So when I draw these days, instead of shading with a pencil, I draw loops or squiggles to create shadows. So mimicking very organic lines. So I occasionally do, and I still focus on portraits or full body figures, because that was really my forte.
That's amazing. I mean, that you could be so gifted in both art and science as well, and you can kind of just pick like, oh, you know what, I think I feel a portrait coming on. And then you create this entire new way to do it, and then you go, well, you know what, I think I kind of still want to work on some creating a new COVID test, which is what you are doing currently. You are doing research, and we talked about it obviously before I did the whole introduction and whatnot. But like our second number is 42 because you have 42 updates, as I looked earlier today, on your YouTube page.
Yeah.
42 COVID updates. So what urged you to jump into like COVID research, feet first? I know there's a story about a friend who passed away and all of that kind of stuff. So how did that come about? What that pushed you to continue? And then like 2 years in, you're still doing it.
Well, obviously, we're living through a pandemic, and pandemics. I was aware about pandemics. I was aware of the possibility that eventually we're going to be hit by the big one, which, by the way, this is not it. This is not the dangerous
Oh
pandemic
no,
that
this
could
is not
still
the big
sweep the
one.
globe. It's not the big one because it's not that deadly. It's so we honestly dodged a bullet there with what it could have been, how dangerous or how bad it could have been, and at the same time, the ushering of new technology, mRNA technologies, that's very close to my heart because we go from DNA to mRNA to the protein. Proteins are like the little molecular robots. mRNA is the blueprint to produce the protein. DNA is the filing cabinet to produce the mRNA, the blueprint, right? So that hence this
Okay.
is
Okay.
completely aligned to my field of genetics and interest in that technology. And of course, the pandemic affected everyone's life, and it really had an impact on everyone, some negative impact on everyone's life, and especially for work. And I had to pivot to some degree. It wasn't that easy to try to sell
Yeah.
full genomes in the midst of pandemic, but this
Right.
topic was still very interesting to me. And I do have a background in virology to some degree because after my doctorate degree, I did some postdoctorate studies that
Mm.
involved study of agricultural animal genomics. And one
Mm-hmm.
interplay that we were looking at and I was interested is potentially see how viruses can affect the health of animals. So I
Right.
got to study about vaccines a lot, back then vaccines used in animals, which is the majority of vaccines produced in the world, and then
Yeah.
also how viruses might be interplaying with that. So
So you
there's
already
a
had
lot
like
of
a
pieces of information
foundation.
coming together here. Yeah.
So you already had like a foundation of, vaccines and
Yeah,
these
vaccines
different.
came in there, virology came in there, immunology is my
Yeah.
PhD, right? And then mRNA technology, that's part of my genetics. All of these are different segments that I already looked into study here and there. And right now, it's just a lot of focus on this particular information. And it's such I guess, confusing topic still because there's so many
Mm.
different pieces of information coming from different sources. And what I
Yeah.
find, and my niche is that I'm trying to discuss actual science paper. I present these science papers. I show the science paper so that the audience can literally see what it is that I'm talking about in a given video. But then my goal is always to give it to you in a language that hopefully if I do a good job, you will understand what I'm talking about, where I'm
Right.
coming from, and what it all means.
So what made you like how did you get to like, okay, I guess I want to do a YouTube channel and I want to start to do these breakdowns. How did you get from, okay, I got to pivot and I think this COVID thing is something that I really want to study, to going, oh, like this is a lot of great stuff, and then to, people need this information to get into YouTube. How did that transition happen?
I started a YouTube channel about DNA testing, right? But no one is looking at the DNA testing. There's a trickle of viewers. And when I started doing information about COVID, which is just for general education, the numbers just skyrocketed. So
Mm-hmm.
the YouTube channel took off. It has a huge number of followers right now, which is fantastic. Yeah, because it gives me much greater audience to enjoy the science I want to talk about and teach about.
Right.
And it's the interest was much greater, which is too bad because of my real heart and passion is in medical DNA testing, which is
Right.
still deeply underappreciated in our population. What a powerful technology and resource it is that frequently is not available to people through your typical healthcare services, and at least not the technology that we bring to the table. Because you know how it is. Technology is always more advanced than what you're gonna get in healthcare
Exactly.
services.
So like, what's one of those things about DNA that you wanted people to know, but like you said, like you weren't getting the same kind of traction when you were doing the DNA kind of videos?
Well, you know where I'm really focusing on right now to actually send this message across is, and where I personally think how genetic testing might truly now revolutionize and benefit our society on a very broad scale is through a simple DNA test called pharmacogenetic DNA test. So that's a test where you can align how the medications you take might be responding based on your personal genetics. And that test exists, it's very well validated and hugely beneficial to those who take medications. They're not all medications, of course, in the world are validated. Maybe about 300 medications are properly validated to how they can be linked to your genetics. The way and how it can be very useful is because right now when a doctor prescribes you a medication, it's a random shot whether how effective it will be on you. What is prescribed to you is based on historical averages of what works best on average. But whether you are that average or not, well, it's totally dependent on your genetics. So you might be the average, but you might be fast metabolizer, and that means the drug that was given to you will be used up way faster than it can act. Or if you're a poor metabolizer, it will be in your system for so long that then you run the risk of maybe experiencing some toxic side effects. So that's where this can be very useful. But especially why now is because clearly we just going through pandemic. The pandemic clearly had a huge negative mental health impact on our society. We are going through actually mental health crisis right now. And how is that tied to pharmacogenetic testing is because the largest medical specialty most represented in terms of which drugs can we link to your personal genetics are the ones involved in mental health treatment. And on top of that, those who are in that space and need to take these type of medications already know that if you take medications for mental health treatment, you run the highest risk of possibility that you might have to switch from one medication to another because the first one you'll try might not work for you. And this is why genetic testing could be so useful, because you might reduce that unnecessary trial and error, because you might find out based on your genetics, hey, you should even take this medication in the first place because it will be toxic to you. Or the one you're taking
another option
maybe would have been good to you, but you took the wrong dose. So you can really eliminate some of these unnecessary and painful trial and errors. So that's just mental health. And there's, of course, oncology is represented there, cardiovascular diseases, infectious diseases. Pharmacogenetic test covers a whole wide gamut of different medications. Go check out our website. We do have in our store, we link a video, or you can go to the YouTube channel. We have a video that very rapidly scrolls all the medications that are currently validated and linked to personal genetics. If you are on that medication, you should highly consider taking the test. It can be that useful and it's not that expensive.
So once someone gets the DNA test, like what will be the next step?
So it depends what the DNA test is. Of course, we just talked about pharmacogenetic tests, but there are other forms of tests you could be doing. You can screen yourself. So you and I, we're presumed healthy individuals. We look healthy. We don't have any symptoms of disease and so on. But we can screen ourselves, for example, right? To see, is there anything lurking in our genetics that could be predisposing us to any potential health risks in the future? And once you know that, then you can be proactive about that. And luckily for us, the most common problems that are identified in such presumed healthy individuals like you and I are problems that oftentimes there actually is an intervention available to you. So
like what's the most common?
Most common intervention actually is surveillance. Sounds boring, but this is very, very practical for cancer. If you have cancer predisposition, genetic risk, surveillance is very key. So you increase how frequently you check yourself for cancer development so that you can catch that cancer. If it materializes, it's not never a guarantee to catch it as early as possible, because we all know that the later the stage of cancer development that you discover it at, the more difficult it is to treat, and I mean, sad to say, the less likelihood of person's survival from such cancer. So then, and approximately 10% of all cancer patients, they were born with genetic predisposition to cancer development. So then, many of us are walking around with genetic cancer predisposition without being aware.
Right. So what is the one test that you would suggest, like a regular person, a teacher, or like myself could go and do that would help me find these things out and then be able to be preventive in my care?
Well, the best test I would always say is full genome, meaning you decode all of your DNA. Why? Because then you only need to do one test in your lifetime. That's it, because your genome is your entirety of your DNA. Then once you decode that DNA, you're done. You never have to do another genetic test in your lifetime. What you would have to do—
How long does that take?
You would have to wait a few weeks. However, full genome is very expensive. It costs several $1,000s, but that's your entire program code, right? If you wanted to do this when the technology just came out, when we were talking about earlier how I got into this, it would have cost you several $1 million. So the price dropped dramatically, but it's still expensive. It's not going to be for everyone, for sure. That's why if it's not in an individual's price range, that's why I would say relapse to the pharmacogenetic test, because we're all going to end up taking medications at some point in our lifetime. Very few people can dodge that, right? Because we all eventually age, and as we age, things stop working properly and so on. And we have to start fixing things through medications and other interventions. Of course, if you want to diminish that likelihood, then we all know, lead as healthy lifestyle as you possibly can, right? We all know
By doing what? By doing what?
Well, obviously exercise regularly, right? And it doesn't take much. So it doesn't have to be like go to the gym and buy iron, right? Exercise doesn't have to be like that, right? Even if you take stairs instead of elevator, provided that your physiology allows you to do that, right? And if you walk rather than take a car if it's a short distance. But also diet, hugely important. So learn what is the best quality diet. Avoid junk food, right? Stop smoking. Everyone knows that, though, right? This is common knowledge. The bigger issue is the discipline for all of us. All of us, myself included. I'm very brainwashed because I'm a scientist. So I've been encountering scientific literature against what happens if you don't follow this type of lifestyle. What are the potential negative outcomes to your physiology? So I'm very brainwashed, and so I try to exercise, eat well, and so on. But I put a bag of chips in front of me, and my discipline is gone out the window.
That was gonna be my question. Like, okay, are you always having this like tug of war in your mind of like, man, I really want to eat, the ice cream, but I know that it's gonna do this or whatever that is. Like, okay, so what's your favorite? Like, let's have some fun here. Like, what's your favorite thing to eat that you shouldn't?
It's So yes, it totally is there, right? So I try to be a nibbler as opposed to instead of having full dessert, you just have a fraction and you share that whole thing, right? Which is enough. Also, you'd be surprised how little your body needs in order to function effectively and be able to take out all of the energy out of the fuel that goes into your body. I definitely try to minimize sugar intake. In general, that's a standard rule of mine. It's very difficult, by the way, so don't punish yourself if you're not succeeding, because sugar is in everything, right? And so, but that means you do need to check labels and see the higher the sugar is on the list, that means the more of that particular component is in whatever product you're purchasing. One rule of thumb I have, though, is fruits are unlimited. Yes, they have sugar, but that's unlimited for me because they come with so much other nutrition. And in general, as a society, we usually tend not to eat enough vegetables and fruits in general anyway. And those are very healthy for you. So that
Yeah,
one is
I'm
like, you know, if I have my,
vegetables.
you know, midnight munchies, then I'm like, okay,
Uh-huh.
fruits, banana, whatever. Maybe that's not
Ah,
good either, right? But fruits is that's where I allow myself to go as much as I want. And I still
so
probably don't eat enough fruits in general.
my general rule of thumb, like when I talk to people, because I can't say that I've done like a ton of research, right? I've done a little bit, and I've tried different things. I've never been a fad diet kind of person, but I do know that you do got to kind of try to make some changes to have a healthy lifestyle. And I'm always trying to think, okay, the changes have to be a lifestyle change. Don't just start doing something just because, oh, this is the new thing. So I'm always kind of thinking, and this is my my foundation, right? So if I'm meat, fruit, vegetables, if I could just kind of stay with those three things and kind of keep everything else to a minimum, I should be fine. So is that thinking, is that thinking in the right direction, or am I a little off base anywhere?
Mm, Maybe a little bit of base because you do need a proper variety. So you do want to make sure you get some of your starches as well to some degree, and you
Mm-hmm.
want to make sure you have your nuts as well. That's another problem where we, in general, as a society, we don't have enough intake of that. Meats, you want to reduce that, especially eliminate processed meats. Mm, So, and in general, we eat too much meat as a society, which has its own consequences. Meat, it's not that meat is
Right.
unhealthy, it's the quantity of it is an issue. So, meat obviously comes with its own
Issues.
sources of nutrition, right?
Right, right,
So,
right.
fiber is really important as well. Fiber is also going to be good for muting the effect of all the sugar that might be in
Yeah,
everything we eat
yeah.
as well, because sugar is especially now when we're dealing with pandemic, right? We do want to be careful with it because sugar is not good for your immune system. It's pro-inflammatory in its function. And
Mm.
recently, because I talk a lot about sugar in my videos, it took me a while, but I finally introduced the topic that in molecular biology, almost everything is covered in sugar. The reason why is because
Oh,
sugar is one of
great.
these. I know, like I even joke that if you could have like a microscope that could show you where there's microscopic levels of sugar, then everything would be covered in sugar. The reason why is because bacteria cover every single surface you can imagine, and
Yeah.
sugar will be on top of bacteria. It's one of those elemental molecules that they can be pieced together like pieces of Lego together, so you can build really cool structures with sugar. And it's used in molecular biology a lot. So that means there's sugar everywhere. And I get a lot of questions about sugar these days. And as a consequence, I'm learning a lot more about that to be able
Right.
to answer more of these questions. But one concept that I came across recently, which I have to verify, but apparently the the intake of sugar has a
Hmm.
compounding effect on how it accumulates inside your body. Because when you have sugar on top of proteins or on top of your cells, which is absolutely normal, by the way, they can grow over time in these branches. And the
Wow.
more sugar you might intake over your lifetime, the more of that can grow. So I was actually fascinated about that, but I do need to learn more about that and confirm that, because I was like, whoa, I didn't even know
Uh-oh.
about
Like
that.
the sugar's growing in my body. There's a tree of sugar in my body, just creating more branches every time I eat ice cream.
Possibly like that, exact, sort of like that. But remember, sugar is in everything, right? So it is a very elemental molecule. And everything comes to balance. So sugar, we need it. It's an energy source, right?
Hmm.
But it's how much you have. So it's the
Right.
same thing like in the pandemic right now. Those who have severe COVID-19, the reason why they experience these severe outcomes is because they experience what is referred to as cytokine storm. So they have too much inflammation. So
Right.
proper amount of inflammation is good because it protects you against pathogen's ability to multiply itself once it has infected you. But if you have too much, it can go the other way around. So everything is about proper balance. So clearly you need sugar because sugar is a fuel and a very powerful fuel. Your mitochondria can break down and create literally like, think of tiny miniature batteries that can then be used throughout your body for all the little functions. But if you have too much of it, then there's also negative outcomes. And because sugar is in everything, I always say minimize it as much as you can.
Okay. In 1997, there was this movie that came out, and I really like this movie. It's called Gattaca. Have you ever seen it?
Long time ago, so I don't remember the plot, but I enjoyed it back then.
So I pulled up the plot just in case. So this kid, well, everybody is genetically basically created, right? And if you have natural children, they're basically ostracized, right? They're discriminated against because they don't have the perfect gene makeup. And so I thought of that movie when I thought of like genetics. And so like this one, Ethan Hawke is the main actor. And he kind of takes his brother's place because he gets injured somehow. And so I say all that to say, like, what movies or movie, and you're smiling, I think you've gotten some kind of questions like this, get close to believable things that could happen with DNA, like things that's like when you watch it, you go, oh, that's not too far off. Like, can you name a movie or two that do things that could be pretty close?
You know what? Unfortunately, I won't be able to because I never memorize movies, never memorize titles, to a point where I can rewatch the same movie and not even realize I've seen it. But yeah, you get a bit of both. And oftentimes, information is stretched for obviously the purpose of
entertainment,
making the plot go easier, I suppose. But for example, Gattaca, is that feasible? Not at the moment at all. However, we have already attempted to manipulate our human genome, i.e. designer babies. That happened in China, 2018, followed by a very worldwide condemnation of that. We're talking about where fertilized egg was taken and genetically manipulated to basically create a new human being. And then it was implanted in a woman that gave birth to live children that were genetically modified or manipulated in this fashion like that. So we are clearly pushing boundaries to eventually achieve manipulation of our genomes. And I do believe this will happen.
How does that happen? How does that work?
So in this case, they use technology called CRISPR. This technology actually stems from bacteria. You know how we have our own immune system? Well, think of it like CRISPR is bacteria's immune system, so that when viruses invaded, because viruses invade cells and hijack cells in order to force the cell to replicate viral genomes, and so that more virus particles can be produced. Well, bacteria will try to fight that, and they have a system that they will recognize viral genome and they will cut it up. So then the virus becomes, well, it's destroyed. And we can use that same system to allow us to manipulate genes wherever we want. So that's why CRISPR has revolutionized genetics in how we can manipulate it. So that's the system that was used at the time. That's what we would be using. Are those
kids still alive? Like,
no one knows. No one knows anything about them. Most likely they're alive because the type of alteration that was done inside those particular fertilized eggs or those embryos was ones that already found naturally in a human population. So they were attempting to mimic that. And the idea behind that was to prevent those children or this these people to be able to be infected by HIV in the future, because we noticed that certain people have reduced likelihood of infection by HIV because they have the specific mutations in one of their genes. That's what they were duplicating there. But it's unethical because it's not necessary. There are other ways to prevent HIV infection apart from manipulating with your genome. And the reason why it's unethical is because CRISPR is still not a perfected technology. While we can target it to a specific site, we do know that it can also go somewhere else and do make changes in other areas of your DNA where we don't want it to. So that's one possible problem with use of this technology. Too early. I actually never thought I would see this in my lifetime. So now I was just shocked when I saw this. But I do think we will actually make changes to our genome in the future. I do think we'll cross that barrier because I don't think humanity has ever.
We can't help ourselves.
Exactly. We never stopped ourselves because of ethical barriers. So we have already breached every single layer of ethics possible, right? We did crazy things already. This is probably another crazy thing we'll do one day, where we'll start tampering with our genomes. Some of it you might think might be for good purposes. So I'll give you one example.
Sure.
But potentially we could be dramatically reducing aging, because aging is pre-programmed in our genome. There's a mechanisms taking place that force our bodies to age. So we could potentially dramatically reduce aging, or maybe let's fantasize big, maybe completely eliminate it, right? So there's one thing. Cancer would be another one. So very large animals like whales or elephants, they don't have cancer, and the reason why they don't have cancer is because their machinery that they have that is involved in duplicating their genetic material is just like perfect. Ours is not. The advantage that they have is they don't have cancer, but they don't have the same genetic diversity as the population that we do. Our machinery is not as perfect as theirs. Why would theirs have to be so perfect? Is because whales are the largest animals that ever lived on this planet, ever. So then imagine how many cell divisions have to take place in order to produce a whale from a single one cell, when it's like trillions upon trillions, right, of cells. And if you were to potentially introduce a mistake every single time you duplicate the genome, which kind of can happen with us, then they'd be getting cancer right away in their childhood, right? For us, our system is not perfect, but typically, unless you're born with predisposition to cancer, typically we as individuals don't get cancer till very late stages of our life, partially because we accumulate mutations when our cells have been dividing over our lifespan, because the system that copies genetics from one cell to another is not perfect. So then, oops, here's one mutation. Here's another mutation. And eventually you could have an unfortunate combo of mutations that break the cell's ability to be controlled properly and will divide uncontrollably. Boom, there's your cancer.
Wow.
So we could potentially remove that. We could remove our ability to ever grow and develop cancer. Amazing. Technically, we could eradicate that if we knew how to properly manipulate with our genomes. Should we ever do it? Well, I would say no, because our genomes are so complicated that unless we understand how our genome functions absolutely from every single possible angle, then there's always going to be unintended consequences when you're manipulating with our genetics.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's well said. So I think, wow, I mean, what's going to happen. Eventually it's going to happen, but it takes like some restraint, right, to do the right thing. And so we need to have people with the knowledge, obviously, to be around to help them make those kind of decisions. And you are somebody with a great wealth of knowledge. So when we get to the end of most of our episodes, I have what's called my 3 whats. And I'll ask you 3 what questions. And then I want you to talk about money, mind, DNA before we get out of here.
Okay.
So the first one is, what's an opinion you have in your field that will be considered unpopular?
Okay. Really unpopular is that vaccination has pushed the viral evolution right now. So we are unfortunately extended the pandemic length because of the vaccination. Why?
Wow.
Because we were not able to eradicate the virus out of the population with vaccination, but instead, the amount of antibodies we produce, those antibodies is an attack source on the virus, but it was not able to overcome and eliminate the virus. Instead, it pushed the virus evolution. Very unpopular. So please don't judge because because yeah, no one wants to hear potentially that something like that, right? Because we all want a good thing to come out of this. So
Right. So basically the virus has been pushed to the point of, okay, now I have to change. Now I have to get stronger. We didn't kill
that's
it. We just maimed it. And now it's come back, different.
yeah, and that's why we have witnessed for the first time in our biological history an emergence of immune escape variants. So variants that are now capable to escape majority of the antibodies that we produce as a consequence of taking vaccines. Just the virus is like, nope, they're not even touching me because it has mutated in such way that these antibodies don't work against it. And that's why everyone's getting infected now, everyone.
So, I mean, that just opens up like a new a new branch of questions. So would there need to be like another vaccine, a different vaccine, a new like what will be our next step since the virus continues to mutate?
Yeah, at this point, I don't know. We need to restore the proper balance, which is we cannot have the same immune pressure on the virus. And what I'm especially worried is that now this virus, as a consequence of how it has evolved very rapidly in the last year, it has become one of the most infectious viruses we know of right now. And because it's so incredibly infectious, it is now driving its own evolution because it's infecting so many people so rapidly. And all these people will instantly start producing antibodies. And the same antibodies will now be antagonizing that same virus that stimulate those people to produce those antibodies. And these antibodies now will drive further evolution of that virus. So it's just now we're in this weird loop.
Cycle.
It's a cycle. So what would need to happen is we would need to either alter the quantity of the virus or alter the quantity of antibodies, but I'm not exactly sure how we could really achieve that. So I'm just watching and trying to learn and discover because we're in completely new territory that we've never been before. We've never been in this situation. What we're witnessing right now with this virus and this wave after wave after wave of new variants in such a rapid succession, we've never been in that state before. That's new, new information for future science books.
Yeah. So let's get off of COVID. Let's take a right turn. If you weren't doing what you do now, with science and DNA sequencing and creating new COVID tests and all of the amazing, well-needed things that you're doing, what would you be doing? I think we kind of have our answer. I think you would be an artist, right?
No, I would.
Ooh, come on now.
I mean, the reason why I chose to deviate from art and go somewhere else is because my thoughts was, hey, I can always keep an art as a hobby, but you rarely can keep being a scientist as a hobby. You still can, but not as easy as being an artist as a hobby. So if I had to maybe restart everything and look back, I probably would go into economics. And the reason why is because it's a field where you constantly also evolve or develop new financial instruments. And if you're really good at it, you can make just ridiculous amount of money on somewhere like Wall Street, like ridiculous. But you do have to know your stuff. So that's probably where I would be thinking very few people probably would, out of pure interest, think, yeah, economics, yeah, derivatives. But if you actually did start studying that information very early in your life, then already in your 20s or
Yeah.
20s, early 30s, you could be a bona fide expert that makes a ridiculous amount of money. So
But
I
you're a
think they'll be just
researcher.
different. It's still being a researcher, yeah. It's still, and you still have to. Very few people understand mm, financial world and economics. And I'm not pretending that I do. I'm just saying probably where I would think of going, because
Mhm.
I like complex topics anyway. I'm constantly exposed to that in science. However, having said that, I
All
do
right.
love molecular biology, so I'm not complaining by any means. I just wanted to
Okay.
make sure I answer your question
Oh,
adequately.
it is clear that all of the things that you're doing, you love it, because these things are not easy. Like, this is complex, deep things that need to be researched over and over by multiple people and cross-referenced and cross-checked. And if you don't love it, it'd be hard to stay in it. That's just me from the outside looking in. So definitely we as a world are lucky to have such people to do the kind of research that many people are not dedicated or sometimes just even interested enough to do. So we all have our different areas of expertise. And, hopefully you're helping to service humanity and make the world a better place by the things that you research and the things that you do. So I am a high school teacher and I enjoy teaching high school students. So my last question here is, what advice would you give to someone in high school?
Hmm, interesting. I knew you were gonna ask me a question I never heard before that is gonna make me wonder. Well, first of all, I place teachers in a similar category to, like, say, nurses, meaning very prestigious category. So people who
Oh, thank
directly
you.
influence our society for the better. So
Mm.
you being a teacher, you influence future generations. So one one aspect that I would, for example, want to see from someone like yourself is to be able to inspire children and
Mm.
enhance their joy of discovering the world. How one can do that, not sure, but the only way I could imagine is to probably be a little bit silly and goofy and a lot of playfulness, because I think school, unfortunately, is sometimes way too boring for children,
Yes.
because children are, well, they're meant to play, and they can
Right.
learn ferociously through play. So I think
Agree.
you are responsible for molding our future generations. It's a wonderful responsibility.
Oh,
I
no
think
pressure. No pressure.
fondly of many of my teachers. I wouldn't be who I am if there weren't seeds planted. It's not just my parents. No way. I obviously put a lot of credit to my parents for molding
Mhm.
me who they are. Absolutely. I had a very wonderful childhood. So thank you, mom, dad, for giving me that. But there's more than your parents. Teachers often act as parents. That's why I said right away, like teachers, nurses, firemen, doctors, those are people who dedicate their life to actually make the world a better place without
Yeah.
actually seeing necessary immediately any
Oh
reward for that.
man,
The reward
that's true.
is going to be beyond your lifespan, right? So that's courage. So right on. Mm, yeah,
Thank you. Thank you.
have fun
I
with
feel
those
like
kids. It's
I feel
basically
like I
have
have an
fun with
important
those kids.
job.
You do, of course you do. Like, yeah.
Okay. Before we leave, talk money mind DNA. Like I said before, we've got the DNA here. We've got the scientists. So talk about it. When is it happening? What is it about from your end? And then tell people where they can find you.
Absolutely. So three of us got together. We met together through presenting together at different events, and we all hit it off. These three guys, and you already mentioned one of them is a financial expert, the other one is a psychologist. I'm the geneticist, and we thought about the concept. Look, we have so much strife and so much trauma going on right now. We all believe that each one of us, what we deliver to the world, we're there to actually help people. That's really the major motivation driving all of us. I would imagine it's the same thing for you as well.
Yep.
So this motivation to help, right, to make the world a better place. And then we thought, well, we all believe in that, and when we heard each other, we all acknowledge that we are all correct, but why don't we put all of our resources together as a package? So hence we call at least I call it like a holistic proactive well-being program. Holistic because
Nice.
we come from multiple different angles. Proactive because we want to teach you the different tricks of how to be proactive about your own well-being, so that you don't have to react to a problem. What can you do in order to stay at the best state of mind possible? And we offer this to business owners so that we can bring this to employees. And the reason why employees, right, it of course applies to everyone, but the reason why we're thinking of employees per se is because we think of the concept that happy person does the best work. And most
Yep.
people, when they do good job, when they do perform certain work, if they're feeling good about themselves, they actually want to show off their talents and skills. They are, or I know I do. If I interact with a client, I do want to show
Guilty.
off everything I've learned over the years, and I want to do my best. And we think that actually goes to majority of people, provided that they are in that proper state of mind. So we offer this to business owners as a package to bring to their employees. It's a 6-week long program where we teach the three of us. We alternate. Money goes first, mental health goes second, I go last. So my aspect is physical well-being, but with a twist
Mhm.
of adding how you can use DNA mapping to help you
Right.
achieve that well-being. So that's what that's all about. And we
Man,
have
that's awesome.
ongoing events where business owners can register. They're free, and we have one coming up next week. You can find about that on
Hmm.
moneymindDNA.ca. Very easy.
And where
MoneymindDNA.ca.
moneymindDNA.ca. Now,
Mhm.
where can people find you? I know we mentioned your YouTube channel, any socials or anything. Just tell people where they can find you and listen to all the great information that you have.
My marketing director probably opened every single social media channel possible, with the exception of maybe TikTok. And I know she's already thinking about it. All of them are always the same handle, Merogenomics. Website is merogenomics.ca. So that's MERO, genomics with an S at the end.ca. The reason why I'll plug that website is because if you're thinking of DNA testing, go to the tab called procedure, and you're going
Mhm.
to learn everything I believe you should learn before you ever do any DNA testing. It doesn't matter if you do DNA testing through Merogenomics, any company, any DNA testing, educate yourself first. I'm very proud of the website as an educational source. That's actually was
Mhm.
its primary purpose. So you can learn, if you're thinking about DNA testing, go there, find out what are the limitations, what are the benefits of different DNA testing, what should you think about that you won't think about, right? How
Right.
should you communicate with your family, etc. Little things like that. So it's worth checking out for sure. So that's merogenomics.ca. YouTube channel is probably the most popular of any of those social media
Mhm.
aspects, because we at the moment we have over 100,000 subscribers. Mm, Then again, we are focusing predominantly right now on COVID.
Mhm.
We left DNA testing in the dust for the moment. This is what people want to hear. I still am making DNA testing information and
Mhm.
videos, but I'm a bit nervous to post it right now, right? Because people are so into this constant information, because
Yeah.
we're pandemic is not over yet, and we
Right.
just don't know yet what's happening.
I was looking through your updates, and the one I think that really popped was update number 15, and it had 228,000 views. Before that, you had some successful ones with like 10,000, and some with a couple thousand, couple hundred. But this one was the one, if you go back and look now, was the first one, I think, pretty sure, that had like hundreds of thousands of views. And it just kind of blew up, right? So how did that change things? I was just interested to ask.
So actually, I had one few after. So I have one that hit 2.5 million. That one really took change everything for the YouTube channel. It brought probably 50,000 subscribers right there. And that one was about discussing the concept that there was a publication that came out which suggested, it didn't prove it, it suggested that the spike protein might be getting inside the nucleus. This still hasn't been confirmed. I did make a follow-up video showing another data that confirms that possibility, but that's not unequivocally proven yet at all. So that still is yet to be determined. But that one, people really, really curious about, because that was actually worry from the beginning. And unfortunately, throughout the pandemic, we went through ridiculous censorship that I've never experienced in my life. Not in Canada. I come from communist Poland, so I know about censorship, but not in Canada, not in the Western world. This type of level of censorship, to a point that no opinion was could have been made, and yet people were curious, so they could even ask questions, whether they're silly questions or correct questions, wrong questions. They could even ask, and how do you alleviate people's worry? Is by being able to tell them and talk to them, so that people don't have to stress about, if they don't hear anything, they're just going to think of the worst, right?
Yes,
that's what
exactly.
we relapse. We always relapse to like, oh, this must have happened. Like we always have a tendency to relapse
all the way
to the worst thinking.
Worst thing possible. You go, well, it's not that deep. It didn't go that far.
and exactly, it's usually nothing near of what you're going to be thinking, right? So that one really helped, and then a number of other videos, so together they snack it up, so now we're over 100,000.
Yeah, I was looking through and I'm like, wow, like this one had this much, and then you had a couple that went crazy. So it was great having you on. I know before I was kind of like, man, he's a scientist. I don't know, like it may be a little over our heads, but Gans was the guy. He was like, don't worry about it. Like he's great. He's funny. He'll make it easy. He'll make it interesting. And you did. So I'm thankful that you came on, Dr. Raszek. It was awesome. And I mean, make sure you guys go follow merogenomics.ca. Of course, you can follow me at _TonyRambles_ on TikTok, on Instagram. You can follow The Living Numbers Podcast on YouTube. You can also find it on Apple as well as Spotify, and you can listen wherever you listen to podcasts. So signing off.
Follow you right now.
Go. Yes, absolutely. Go check it out now. You can also check out the 2 previous episodes with Dr. Gans, and also our senior financial advisor, Charlie Fatal. Thank you guys for listening, and I will see you all in the next ramble.